In the late 1950s, the map of California looked like this. There were 17 U.S. highways reaching every corner of the state, connecting the state's largest cities and its small towns too. These U.S. highways were the workhorses of the Golden State's transportation network. In addition to these 17 primary routes, some of these routes also had alternate routes, or freeway bypasses, that made the number of distinct routes even higher. There were alternate routes, there were bypass routes, and routes that split into multiple branches. By 1970, the map had changed drastically. Only 7 of those former U.S. highways still sported those familiar black and white shields. In the entire state of California, 7. Most of those 7 routes which remained were located in the extreme edges of the state, far away from the bulk of California's traffic and population. Some of those remaining routes were shells of their original selves, and for the most part, these remaining routes weren't even connected to each other. In all of California, there were only 2 places left where any of those remaining U.S. highways intersect. Only 2 of the remaining routes touch major population centers. Los Angeles once had 6 different U.S. routes pulsing through the heart of its downtown, but now it has only 1 U.S. route left in the entire county. So what happened to all those U.S. routes? In short, 1964 happened. It was a grand plan which dramatically altered the map of California. They call it the Great Renumbering of 1964. But why? In this series of videos, This Old Road explores the whys and hows of California's massive route renumbering from the 1960s. In this episode, I'll talk about the whys behind the big move, the rationale for this radical change. And then, in subsequent episodes, I'll explore the hows. What happened to the routes? What routes are they now? And how was all of this implemented? Because although the change technically occurred on July 1st, 1964, the changes to the signage occurred gradually over a number of years. First, let's talk about the problem. Prior to the Great Renumbering, several roads in the states had 3 numbers. There was 60, 70, and 99 along the corridor east of Los Angeles, and there were 2 different places where these same 3 routes were concurrent. The highway climbing over Cajon Pass north of San Bernardino was numbered as 66, 91, and 395. And US 6699 left downtown LA on the Pasadena freeway alignment. There were hundreds of miles of highway all over the state that had 2 numbers, like 91 and 466 from Barstow up to the state line on the way to Las Vegas, or 60 and 70 across the desert toward Arizona at Blythe, and 40 and 50 across the Bay Bridge. Throughout the 1950s, California aggressively built freeways connecting its cities through all of its major metropolitan areas. All of these numbers on a single road meant that the signage on the new freeways could be very confusing and difficult to follow. There were lots of route shields for a motorist to process when moving at a high rate of speed, especially at the junctions of the freeways. In the early 1960s, things got even more complicated because new numbers for interstates began to show up too. These new routes added even more numbers to the already overcrowded existing signage. It was the addition of these new interstates which really forced the issue of the numbering problem. This new system of federally funded freeways was championed by President Eisenhower and approved by Congress in 1956. In the plan, California would be getting 6 of these brand new highways: 5, 8, 10, 15, 40, and 80. And in addition to these major routes, some lesser local connections were coming too. By 1960, the signs for some of these new routes began to appear in the Golden States, usually on these same new freeways that California had been constructing over the previous decade. Those new freeways already had U.S. route numbers, but now they were sporting interstate route shields too. As I mentioned, there were already places where one freeway had as many as 3 U.S. highway numbers, but now a 4th number was being added to the same freeway. That's right, 4 numbers on one single road. I imagine that this was probably a big factor as to why Southern Californians came to prefer referring to the freeways by names rather than numbers. Here's the San Bernardino Freeway, which carried US 6, 70, and 99 east of downtown, but now it was also becoming Interstate 10. North of San Bernardino were US 66, US 91, and US 395 already ran together up and over Cajon Pass. Now Interstate 15 was joining the party too. These and dozens of other routes with multiple numbers all over the state fueled the desire to simplify things. In addition to these roads with more than one number, the interstates brought another issue too: numbering conflicts. Some of the numbers that were being designated for the new interstates were already in use as U.S. or state highways. For example, Interstate 40 was coming to Southern California, but the state already had US 40 up north. It was a similar scenario for Interstate 80. The new interstate would result in 2 Highway 80s within California. Even as they began to put the new shields up along the highways in the Golden State, California's highway administrators began to formulate a plan to make things less confusing. The result was a plan hatched by the Division of Highways to simplify things, and it had 2 basic objectives. First, each road should have only one number. And second, each number should be used on only one route. Now, there was a third objective to the plan, but it was less apparent to the motoring public, and it had to do with administrative renumbering. The administrative renumbering involved a behind-the-scenes effort to unify the 2 disparate numbering systems which were in place in California. The first, which had been used for legal definitions of the routes in the books, and second, the numbers which appeared on the signs for motorist navigation. In this series, I'll cover only the forward-facing changes, those that impact drivers, and the legislative route renumberings will be discussed only in those 1 or 2 cases where they were relevant to the new numbering plans which affected motorists. This new numbering scheme was approved by the state legislature in 1963 and was set to take effect on July 1st in the following year. It was the Great Renumbering of 1964. In the plan, 2/3 of the U.S. routes were relegated to history. Of the 7 routes which made the cut and survived, more than half of them were shortened substantially. Only 3 of those routes from the early 1960s survived unscathed. The common factor for all of the 7 highways that California retained was that their routings were not duplicated by an interstate. In future episodes, I'll examine what happened to all of the routes, and I'll examine them in groups. The next video, I'll document the 6 routes which disappeared completely from the map of California. Following that, I'll talk about the 4 routes which are shortened substantially and explain why those changes were made. Then, in the final episode, I'll look at the 5 U.S. routes which still live on, but as California's state routes. I hope you'll join me for all of these upcoming episodes. Subscribe to This Old Road and click on the notification bell so that you'll know when new episodes are released. And as for this video, please click on the thumbs up to let YouTube know that you enjoyed it so that they'll share it with other people who like this sort of content. I thank you for watching.